What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and we're back for another episode of the first-person shooter tutorial series. So in this episode we are going to be going over adding splash screens and intro movies to our game. And if you're not familiar with splash screens and intro movies, they're basically the screens that appear when you're launching a game while everything is loading up in the background. It's paying respect to the proper individuals, people who maybe worked on the project or created plugins that you use or published the game that you're playing. And while that's happening, it is loading stuff in the background. So all of our different series will use these splash screens and intro movies, and really every game pretty much does to some extent. Some do more than others, but it's very common practice, and it's very easy to do in Unreal Engine once you know how to do it. We haven't covered this yet for a first-person shooter, so now's a great time to do so. Now, these splash screens and intro movies are only going to appear when we're launching in standalone or packaged. So if we have a finalized product, or we're using standalone, we can launch it right here. But when playing in editor, it won't be slowing you down. You won't have to see that every single time. You can just hop right into the game. So before we hop into this episode, if you want to get caught up in the entire series, see how we've done things like attacking our opponents, health bars, defeating opponents, flooding damage numbers, and a lot more, I'll link you to the entire first-person shooter tutorial series playlist right here in the top right corner. And you can see how we've done all that cool stuff. Alternatively, if you don't care about that and you just care about the splash screens and intro movies, I do recommend that you watch this episode on the main menu. It is not required that you do, but if you do watch it, you'll have the full flow from startup and splash screen to your main menu. I'll link that in the top right corner right here as well. With that out of the way, we can go ahead and get started. So this is a code and blueprint tutorial series. Splash screens are very nicely built into Unreal Engine, so we can do everything through the editor. And this will work in both UE4 and UE5. It is not specific to one or the other. When we are in Unreal Engine, we can go to Edit, Project Settings to pull up all the settings for our project. And one of these is going to be our startup screens and intro movies, also known as splash screens. So we can search for it, or we can just find it in the movies section here. So project movies, you can click on it to go here. Or if you're in all settings like you start in, you can search movies and you will get your movie section here, as well as some other settings for movies. We're not going to focus on any of these today. We really only care about these three options. Now note that if you type splash, you will get splash screens. So these are the splash screens for your game in a package, and then editor splash for when you're launching the editor. And you have different platforms, so you can change it based on the platform. That's another very useful thing, but we're not focusing on that today. So even though I know them as splash screens, in Unreal are typically called startup movies or intro movies, something like that, or just movies in general. Going back to this now, we should go to movies, and we have our settings here. The first two options are pretty self-explanatory, and they are going to be useful, but let's go ahead and add some startup movies first so that we can know what we're working with, and then we can go over exactly what these settings mean. If you go to the startup movie section here, you see it is an array because you can add as many or as little as you want. We can press plus to add an element here, and then we can click the arrow to open this up. This value is expecting a path to a movie. Now you could go find a movie in a different folder, but typically movies in Unreal Engine, or just videos in general in Unreal Engine, want to be in the movies folder. This is where Epic wants you to place them. So first things first, let's get a movie or a video into our project here. So if I go to where I want to put this, if I go to my content directory, I can right click and add a new folder. You can also do this from your file explorer. And I'm going to call it movies, capital M and everything. This is the folder that Unreal typically looks for, content movies. So we go into the movies folder. So I have two file explorers here. One is my section where I want to drag my video from. So I have a few videos that are just backed up here from different projects or different videos that I've used. And so one thing we could grab, for example, would be our store merch overview. So if I go to my first-person shooter project and I'm in the base directory here, I can go to the content folder and then go to movies, and I can just copy one in. So if we're going with this one, I can just simply paste it in, and that will be good to go. Not all movie types are supported in Unreal, but .mp4, .wav will be. And then when we're in here, we can manually choose to import into this folder, just so that we can see it. Because even though it's in there, the editor doesn't know to look for it right now, since we just moved it in. So we can go ahead and open the file that's in the directory, and then you will get this file media source right here. And it has the same name as the video that we copied in. So Store Merch Overview 2023. At this point, I can open up the source, and I can see the file path here. This is where it resides in our content directory. So it's going to the movies folder and then the file itself. In advanced, you could pre-cache this file, which, as the comment says, loads the entire thing into memory and plays it from there. We don't have to do this for our splash screens or anything, so I'm just going to ignore that for now. Then you could do things like override your specific media player based on your operating system, but again, nothing like that is needed for today's episode. So as long as we have this video in here and this file media source in here, we're pretty much good to go. We can go back to our project settings, back to movies, then we go to our index that we created earlier, and we can choose a file from this computer. Now we can go into the movies folder, and we can select our store merch overview 2023.mp4. Now, if we were to change our play mode from new editor window to standalone game and launch it, our first-person shooter template will launch in standalone mode, which does support startup movies. So since we already have a movie link there, we should see a startup movie when it loads. So here is the Unreal Engine splash screen that I was showing you earlier. And now here the actual first-person shooter template is loading. And now our video is playing that we put in the startup movies array there. It will play through this whole thing, and then when it's done, it will go to the rest of the game, which is going to be our main menu. Perfect, and it worked. It's a little slow right now because it's preparing shaders for me, but that's perfectly fine. As long as I can reach my main menu and play the game as regular, we will be good to go. So I'm going to close out of this, and I'm going to go back to my project settings at this point. And now I can go to movies, and now we look at these two options that we have. We have wait for movies to complete, and movies are skippable. Now they are pretty self-explanatory, but wait for movies to complete means even if all the loading in the background has finished for the game, the startup movie is not going to stop and then go to the game. If you'd like every startup movie to be played fully unless skipped by the user, or if movies are not skippable, then you could check this box. And even when everything's loaded, you're still going to get these movies. If you leave it unchecked, it means the players don't have to watch the movies. If it loads fully, it will go straight to the game, or if they skip it, it can go to the game. And that leads us to the next option here. Movies are skippable. So, as the comment says, if enabled, startup movies can be skipped by the user when a mouse button is pressed. So if we want to be able to skip our startup movies, we can simply press left mouse button, but only if this is checked. So do you want to allow movies to be skipped? Sure. But at the same time, I do think we should wait for movies to complete even if everything is loaded. So it has to be an intentional skip by the user. These are just my personal settings. Feel free to change them to whatever fits your game. But if we are to launch again, I have my video playing, my startup movie. I can click the left mouse button or the right mouse button, and nothing's going to happen until everything's loaded. But say I wait a little bit longer. There we go. I was able to skip the movie at that point because everything had loaded and I pressed the mouse button. Now I'm going to change it back to new editor window when I just want to test in editor and I don't want my startup movies, but they are a very important part of many games, if not all games. So hopefully that helped you implement startup movies or splash screens or intro movies in your game. If it did, please subscribe and consider joining the Patreon, YouTube membership, or Discord subscriptions for extra benefits along the way. It helps me immensely and I'm really grateful for it. If you ran into any problems implementing startup movies in your game or with any of my content, please feel free to join the Discord community. There is a link in the description and I would be happy to help you out with any problems you ran into. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.